Ready?
All right, cool. All right, everybody. Welcome to the official CRUN Society bottle tasting. The order we will be tasting today is Fleur, our coolship Saison, Drie, our triple with Brett, and lastly is going to be Materia, which is our mixed fermentation Gose. We're going to do some introductions real quick of the people sitting at this table. This is your time to go grab 3 clean glasses and to get your bottle opener and possibly your corkscrew. We're going to need a corkscrew, I think, for Drie. First on the end here, we have Mckinnen. Do you want to tell everybody a little bit about what you do at Crooked Run?
Hey guys, so my name is Mckinnen. I'm the head brewer at Crooked Run. So I oversee production on both the clean and native culture side, which is our mixed fermentation part of the brewery. Next would be Brad.
My name is Brad Erickson. I do mixed fermentation beers, all of our sour production, packaging, as well as our test pilot batches in Leesburg.
And I'm Zach, guys. I'm the general manager of Crooked Run Brewing. I do a lot of the stuff facing the front of the house and also do all the coordination with the CRUN Society with all of you guys. So today we're going to be drinking some really special beers. These are mixed fermentation and spontaneously fermented beers, and some of them are co-fermented, I believe. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about what all those different things mean. Also, really important, just so you guys know where these bottles come from, when we have beers that we really, really like that we make, we do holdbacks of those bottles. And these were beers that we think are going to be really good that we had in the archives. Fleur is 2 years old now.
Yeah, so Fleur we bottled in December of 2018, so or a little bit before that. So it's almost 2 years old, and that's the only one of these that I've actually had recently in the past month, actually. So you guys will get to kind of experience these beers with us for the first time in a few months, and I'm sure they taste great.
We're gonna have some fun, guys. All right, this question for you guys. Either one of you can take this. What does a spawn ferm beer mean? What does that actually mean?
Spontaneous fermentation, we do open air in our coolship. So we actually knock the beer out, take it straight out of the kettle at boiling, let it sit overnight in an open vessel, and whatever is in the air is what inoculates that beer and ferments it all the way through. There is no yeast pitched onto it. Usually the next morning we'll come out and pump it into barrels, and it'll live in those for 1 to 3 years.
Awesome. Mckinnen, what is a mixed fermentation beer?
So mixed fermentation is exactly what it sounds like. There's multiple different yeast strains going into that beer to actually ferment it out. So, for example, Fleur is a coolship co-pitch beer, which means not only did it go to the coolship and sit overnight to pick up, the natural yeast and bacteria, but we also pitched it with a house Saison strain to co-pitch it. And then again with Materia, there's lactobacillus and brettanomyces in it, and then Drie is 100% Brett, but multiple different strains of Brett.
So these are some really special beers. What was your introduction? I want Mckinnen to go first. What was your introduction to these types of beers that kind of turned you onto them?
The first mixed fermentation beer that I ever had was in 2014, maybe 2013 at Wolf Hills Brewing Company, which is where I got my start. And it wasn't a very good one. It was a blonde that they had put in the barrels and then just picked up wild bacteria and Brett. It was okay, but it definitely had that like strong horse blanket, funky barnyardy kind of thing that I don't really dig so much anymore. And then after that, it kind of got me curious, and so I started getting into more Belgian styles, and then eventually into lambics and goses, such as Dry Fontaine, Cantillon, and so on and so on.
My first experience was in 2011 or 2012, up in Maine, having a couple different beers from Allagash Brewing Company and Oxbow Brewing Company, which I believe, I'm not 100% sure on this, that Oxbow Brewing Company, their owner, actually coined the term mixed ferm. I believe he's the first one I remember actually selling beers as mixed ferm. I might not be 100% correct on that, but that's the first time I remember hearing it.
And I am having a complete brain fart on the name of the beer right now. But New Belgium releases this beer every single year. Yeah, La Folie. That was my very first experience of these beers. I had one of those in I think 2015 or 2016, and that was also like one of the very first sour beers that I had.
I think that was actually one of the first sour beers that I had. I remember having it actually at Wolf Hills, so it was one of the first few that I got to taste and really enjoyed. So,
little known fact: New Belgium had one of the very first sour programs in the country. They're known mostly for Fat Tire, but they make some really great stuff in barrels as well. When did Crooked Run start experimenting with these beers as Crooked Run?
Jake and I made some on a very small scale out in Leesburg in 2014, 2015. And Jake made them as a home brewer. I made them as a home brewer. So, yeah, first time actually commercial scale was probably 2014, 2015 timeframe. We did like some small 10, 15 gallon batches of some different Brett and lacto fermented beers.
Cool.
Some similar stuff to Materia, kind of.
Really, 5 years ago?
Yes.
Awesome. These types of beers, we all call them the Native Culture Program. That's something we launched last year. It's an umbrella for all of these kind of really special, fancy mixed ferm, spawn ferm, cool shipped beers. Can you tell us a little bit about how Native Culture got its start? How did that become its own umbrella, and what was the concept behind it?
So, at the end of the day, these types of beers are something that pretty much every employee at Crooked Run thoroughly enjoys and I think respects. It's been something that I've enjoyed and loved and always have studied since 2013, 2014. And so just kind of the natural evolution of working at a brewery is to start a sour program, which I guess was probably about 2 years ago. We started really coming up with these unique, cool ideas and really getting our technique down to where we were happy and proud enough to slap our name on it, and release it to you guys. And that's we opened up, I guess, Native Culture in December of last year, December of 2019. Since then, we've been able to put out at least one Native Culture release every month. And so to us, it's really just a passion project. It's something that we're really proud of. And just want to continue growing and doing the best we can with it.
Right on. I think it's time for a beer, guys.
Sweet.
Mckinnen, do you want to pull that corkscrew and do the honors of opening this Fleur?
That was a bad idea.
So this beer, like we said at the beginning of this, we've had this one recently, and it was fantastic. I can't wait to open this up and try this again.
It's also me glasses.
You guys out there, CRUN Society members, you guys are the first non-employees of Crooked Run that have drank this beer in probably 18 months. So cheers. This is going to be fantastic. Oh, the color is so good. It's cleared up so much.
So we've had this kind of sitting in our cold room for probably going on 6 months now. There was a time period where we left it kind of warm, and because of that 6 month time, it's really kind of lagered out to create this beautiful clear color.
It's like clear, bright straw, yeah.
It doesn't have much of a head, but I mean the head that is there is pretty pristine white.
Ooh, there's a little bit of funk on the nose. I like that, just a little bit.
Also, guys, quick note, all these are bottle conditioned, so when you pour them, try not to slosh back and forth. And I usually leave about a finger to 2 fingers worth of beer yeast sludge in the bottom of it. You do not want to drink what is in the very bottom of this. The bread in it, the yeast in it creates a very bitter, unpleasant taste. So be very careful about sloshing your bottle around.
Brad, what are you getting out of the nose here? I called you Brad. We're talking about yeast, and I called you Brad. Brad, what are you getting on the nose here?
There's a slight, just a tiny bit of sulfur, which is pretty common in some of these mixed ferm beers. And then it's very herbal. It's very,
Yeah, I get
very,
that.
Like very.
I get that.
It reminds me of really like springtime, like you're walking through like an open field or something. Like it's very grassy.
Yeah, hay.
Very hay-like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fresh cut hay, grass.
Mm-hmm. It's got like a little bit more malt sweetness than I remember. Just a little bit. It's got like a little bit of sweetness to that body. It also is drinking super smooth and nice.
It's
almost gotten less funky, like a little bit less funky.
So I'll be honest. Something that we've all three have talked about before. When we released Fleur, I thought it was pretty good, but it was not my favorite beer at all. It had this very nutty, like popcorn nutty kind of characteristic to it. And after 6 months, it started tasting better in my opinion. And after a year and a half, 2 years, it's kind of dropped a lot of that nuttiness there. It's still there, but it's not like in your face nutty. And it's really just kind of lagered out and become this really delicate, crisp, refreshing beer that I think I've had 2 or 3 bottles of it in the last month now. So,
all right, guys, time to ask you some questions about this beer. When you were creating this recipe, it's a coolship spelt Saison co-fermented with wild yeast strain isolated from elderberries. What does that mean, and what were you trying to get out of this recipe?
Okay, so this is actually the first beer that we ever used spelt in, which is the reason it has that kind of nutty characteristic to it. Zach, you mentioned a sweetness.
Yeah.
So spelt is very similar to wheat. I mean, it's actually a wheat species of wheat, but it tends to have a more nutty and sweet characteristic when it is in beer. And we wanted to use it, and I think we went a little bit overboard on the ratio, which is why it took a year and a half to really kind of mellow out. But that was the reason that we wanted to use the spelt. As far as the yeast strain, do you want to talk about our Saison strain?
Yeah, so our Saison strain, local microbiologist harvested off of our elderberry tree, harvested it off the actual flowers themselves. We had 2.
The one in Leesburg?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah. So it's actually a tree that we use in a beer we just recently came out with. That's not up here right now, but it's called Altruism. We use all the fruit from that tree every single year. Just goes in that beer. That's all we do with it. But while that yeast was in bloom, or while that tree was in bloom, what was it? 2 years
almost
ago?
3 years.
3 years ago?
Actually.
Yeah, probably 2017, probably.
Yeah, it's right when I started.
Yeah. We got those 2 yeast strains isolated off of the actual flowers themselves. And one was kind of banana, had a little too much ester in it for us. And this one is just more classic Saison. It's a diastatic yeast, so it'll just keep eating and eating and eating, and it makes a very, very dry beer, but it's not phenolic. It's not super spicy. It's not super estery. It's perfect for something like this, and you end up with a beer like this when you age it really long with that yeast. It just seems to get super clean. It lagers really well. It clears up. We're very happy with it.
So you mentioned that you had a little bit more spelt in the grain bill than you originally planned. What were the other malts in the grain bill?
Pilsner.
It was all Pilsner, actually. It was just Pilsner and spelt. And I think we used a ratio of close to like 40% of spelt, which is, looking back, kind of absurdly high.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that does explain why we sat on it for so long, and it's tasting so great now.
This beer is really fantastic. Coolship, we talked a little bit about that at the start. Where did Crooked Run's Coolship come from, and how big is it?
So Crooked Run's Coolship is actually locally built. I cannot remember his last name. I know him as Rod. He's a local welder. We pretty much.
Rowley. I think it's Rod Rowley.
Okay. I ended up. Jake contacted him, told him what he wanted. And what's kind of unique about our Coolship is our production facility is in Sterling, but all the coolship stuff is done in Leesburg. So we have to have a mobile coolship. So we're able to transport it back and forth. And essentially, it's just a large square stainless steel bathtub. I cannot be happier with it. It's easy to transport. We can take it anywhere we want. The vast majority of the time, it just stays right under elderberry tree in Leesburg. If you're out there during the wintertime, chances are you'll see one of us out there brewing into it. From there, we pump it into a large tote into the back of the van, drive the van to Sterling, and then we rack that into barrels here. So it's all done pretty short time frame in the winter. So you're usually looking at about a month to 2 months that we can actually produce these coolship beers, and then it's either ungodly cold or too hot. So
yeah, definitely depends on the year. Like this year, we got all of our batches done in pretty much November. We did a couple batches outside of that, but the weather was just bad for coolship season this year. It was probably better a couple weeks ago than it was most of the winter.
Yeah, really.
Unfortunately, but.
All right, guys. So that is what I've got for Fleur. Would you guys like to add anything about that beer?
I mean, as crazy as it sounds, this is kind of like a lawnmower beer for me. I mean, it's you don't really see a lot of people saying this is. I'd like to drink this type of beer, mixed ferm beer, while mowing my grass. But it's really not like super complex. It's not something you have to think about a lot. It's just a really crisp, clean mixed fermentation beer, and I could drink several of these in a sitting, no problem.
And I think one of the cool things to kind of follow up on the spelt is I think some of those more complex malts that have a lot of protein in these Brett-driven beers add a ton of complexity. We've done a few others with different corn, and we've talked about doing some with triticale and a couple different kind of out there malts just to get some unique flavors, and I think this beer definitely tells us that we should do more of that.
Absolutely.
Hi, Brad. Mckinnen, you guys ready to move on to Drie?
Yeah.
So this beer, when it first came out, was one of my favorite beers that we've done because the Belgian Trippel is one of my favorite styles of beer. The traditional Trippel, I love the body on it. I love the high alcohol content. I love the phenols. I love how much banana there is in those beers. We make one called Seek Truth, and it's absolutely a fantastic beer. They took a Trippel, and they kind of flipped it a little bit, and they used 100% brettanomyces in this beer to both condition and ferment it. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we use our house blend. That's a couple different types of Brett that usually doesn't throw off the funky Brett flavors. We wanted this beer to be super fruity, to be more like a classic Belgian Trippel, because you're usually looking for just very fruit forward, a little bit of spice, very aromatic. Like Zach said, it's got a pretty high alcohol content, but you don't want to taste that in a Trippel. You want it to be nice and dry.
While McKinnon's pouring these guys up, these beers, brettanomyces. So in the wine world, that's like the worst thing you could have in your wine. A lot of beer drinkers aren't familiar with it, or they've had bad Brett beers. This beer went 100% Brett, and it's absolutely fantastic. We're gonna smell these real quick, and then I want these guys to talk about brettanomyces after they drink this beer, because there's some notes that when Brett is done well are in this beer particularly. Oh man, I get like pineapple on the nose immediately.
Big pineapple and pear, which it's actually like more like sweet pineapple and pear now to me. Before it was more like skin, or like if you pick up a pineapple at the bottom or at the grocery store and smell the bottom of it, especially if they're like overripe. If you walk by like the pineapples and it smells heavily of pineapple, usually they're overripe.
Oh man!
Now it smells freaking awesome. It's very aromatic, and one of the cool things we did with this beer, like Zach was talking about Brett, when we added it to our bottle conditioning program for this beer, it was kind of an experimental thing. We shot for the amounts of Brett that we thought would be right for bottle conditioning. It was kind of a shot in the dark because we had done a couple beers with this strain and done it our typical bottle conditioning method where we add champagne yeast, and the beers just turned out funky. They were more farmhousey, and that's not really what we're shooting for 100% of the time.
I would say the majority of people here have probably had Time and Tide. I mean, if you're buying a mixed ferm collection, you probably had Time and Tide before, and this yeast strain is actually what we use for Time and Tide, except we bottle condition it with champagne strain. And initially, you get a very fruity beer, but after a month, 2 months, that Brett's a little bit stressed, and it does give you that typical barnyard kind of funky characteristic. And we just weren't really huge fans of it.
For 100% Brett, and I'm getting straight fruit and like none of that horse flank, it is incredible.
It's still a firm bitterness, just like you want. I mean, you want in a triple.
Was this a 2018 or a 2019 release?
So this was a 2019. No,
2018.
No, it was 2018.
Late 2018.
Wow. And
No,
I don't think any of us have had this.
Sorry,
No,
it was
late 2019.
Yeah, it was late 2019.
So 6 months or so?
Yeah, so this beer spent about 3 to 4 months in barrel fermenting, and then we bottle condition it in late August, early September, and then it sat in a bottle for 3 months before we actually released it. I think it was released in November, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe late October. I've not had a bottle of this since January, or maybe even around Christmas time.
Same.
Wow,
so to have this now, it's really, really good.
And that carb is right on point.
That's
so
right.
I want to touch on that real quick. So the Fleur was bottle conditioned, and that was a 2018 release. And I know we did a couple releases where we weren't bottle conditioned, and now all native culture releases are all bottle conditioned now.
Yeah. So I guess the launch of our sour program, not native culture, just sour in general, was the Cuvée release in 2017.
Okay.
That bottle is the only bottle that we force carved. It's the only non-bottle condition that we've done. Since then, we started our first bottle conditioning with nepotism, and kind of surprisingly, knock on wood, we've not had any issues with bottle conditioning. We got it right the first time, and have been kind of tweaking it ever since. But for the most part, have gotten it down pretty well, I think.
So why bottle conditioning versus force carving? What do you get out of the beer, or what is the benefit to the beer to bottle condition it versus force carve?
So my the first response, and the reason I really wanted to go to bottle conditioning was kind of being of a production kind of mentality of when we bottle Cuvée, we lost probably 2-3 gallons worth of beer, just in the natural way of like bottling beer that's been force carved. It's going to overflow. You're going to lose some, and that beer took over a year to produce, and we were super proud of it. To see 2+ gallons on the floor just kind of broke your heart. So nepotism was the next one that we did a month later, and I think we probably had maybe 8 ounces to 16 ounces of loss, which tickled my heart right off the bat. And then the second reason is just it's more traditional. It's what the Belgians do. That's what I feel like you should do if you're going to be making these beers, and you get I think a much better carbonation out of it.
And oxidation's the other.
That's another
the
thing.
other
I was going to
thing.
ask,
So,
does it help? Does it help
potential-
if you're going to store these for a while if they're bottle conditioned?
Absolutely. So your potential for oxidation is not, I don't want to say 100% eliminated, but all of these beers, when they're barrel fermented and barrel conditioned, they're going to have a slight bit of oxidation to them. So any opportunity for you to limit that is a bonus.
Absolutely.
So by us bottle conditioning these, any of that oxygen that's in the headspace when we bottle it is eaten up by that yeast to carbonate that beer. So we're essentially, we've never gotten them tested, but in theory, our dissolved oxygen should be pretty much zero, pretty close.
Let's go back a
Very
little
low.
bit and talk some more about brettanomyces. So I mentioned in the wine world, you don't want that beer, or you don't want that in your wine.
Yeah.
Sorry, you don't want brettanomyces in your wine. I personally have had brettanomyces beers that taste like Band-Aids or other types of off flavors. What is it about brettanomyces that's kind of so hard to control, and what are the bad things that can happen when Brett is not used properly?
So Brett gets stressed out pretty easily, and it throws out those not all the time bad flavors, but it throws off some of the flavors that it's known for when it is super stressed out.
Most notably plastic.
Yeah.
Plastic or Band-Aids or
So if you either underpitch it or if you throw it in a beer that's already fermenting with something else, you could end up getting a really, really bad quality out of it. Not 100% of the time, but sometimes, like Zach said, you can get that Band-Aid or plastic or burnt tire.
burnt tire,
But then also you can get more of the funky notes too, which a lot of people like. We like them in some beers, but we try to have more of the fruitier side of Brett on ours, which we overpitch the beers with that Brett usually. So we're looking for more like this. We're looking for pineapple and banana and pear and really brighter flavors.
It's like, to me, like this is candied orange,
Mhm.
candied lemon.
It's so good, dude. I really am impressed by this beer that I have not had in a while. I'm glad that we still have a couple more bottles that we're going to hold back and probably open in more months from now, maybe years. I'm going to enjoy this last little sip here, and then I think we're going to open up Materia.
Sweet.
Also, guys, we uploaded this on YouTube, so if you want to do this again, if you're joining us on YouTube, you can pause this and finish your beer at whatever speed you want to.
Yeah.
If you're watching with us on the live watch party, keep up.
So I will mention, as we're kind of finishing these beers up, I'm very, very impressed with how this turned out. We had this idea probably last May. We decided to brew it. I think it was probably late June or early July when we actually brewed this last year. And since then, this yeast strain has proven to be a dynamite strain, we've discussed doing other type style L's where do a 100% Brett single, double, and quad, and then kind of just explore that, because traditionally, like these Belgian style beers, and especially like Saisons, they're not really clean beers. To have like a traditional Belgian Saison or French Saison, like there is an aspect of Brett to them. There might be, if you have a 3-year-old Saison or 2-year-old Saison, there's going to be a touch of like pedio or lactobacillus in there. And exploring that idea with, Drie and another single or double or quad would be, I think, really, really kind of fun. And
when you guys find strains that you like, you keep them around, right?
So, for the most part, we haven't bought a yeast strain from the native culture side in years. We have a few golden sours that we bought a few different yeast strains, just trying to play around with them, and we ended up deciding on kind of our house strains, like a coolship strain. We've taken a coolship strain and modified it, pitched a different yeast on it and kind of modified it, and it's on its 5th, 6th generation now, and where it's kind of our own version of that strain. So we haven't really bought anything. We've kind of just taken bits and pieces of what we've had and blended together and created a new strain.
Cool. All right, guys, time to finish these up. Our last beer that we have, guys, is Materia. I think it's my turn to open a bottle of beer here. So if you look at the sticker on the cap of your beer here, this beer came out in October of 2019. This beer was absolutely fantastic, if I remember correctly, from the release. We've got berries, we've got wine grapes. It's a collab that we did with a cidery, so I want to explore that a little bit more as well. And yes, I forgot about the color of this beer. The color of this beer is incredible.
It's cleared out now, so it's very, very it's like
that color is absolutely incredible.
That's probably another thing to note too. Most of these beers should all pour pretty clear.
And just like I'm doing now, keep it tilted.
Yeah, you don't want to splash out too much of that yeast on the bottom there.
I think the only really hazy beer that Native Cultures put out is Persica.
Yeah, Persica. And that's peaches. That's
pectin.
There's so much pectin in those peaches that it's really difficult to clear that beer out.
Oh man, immediately the grapes kind of hit me in the nose a little bit. Almost smells like wine.
Ooh, stick it up front here.
All right, so Materia, untapped description. The untapped description is Materia is a mixed fermentation Gose collab with Graft Cider out of Newburgh, New York. Materia was fermented with Brett yeast and lactobacillus and conditioned on blueberries, black currants, and a huge amount of Tannat. Tannat grapes that came from Walsh Family Wine in Percival. Those are our friends. We love them. Check out their wine. Materia features prominent acidity, light salinity, and a definitive vinous quality. Does that mean like vine?
Yeah,
Wine.
very,
Like
very
vine, like
wine-like.
so. When I said it smells like wine, I was talking about
absolutely.
its vinous character.
Oh, absolutely. It's very wine-like.
Yeah, I think the salt, if anything, plays that up.
It
even
definitely
more.
does. I mean, just like adding salt to any of your food, it kind of elevates that flavor. It really brings those flavors out. You get like a slight salinity to it, but I would never say it's salty. I mean, it just really elevates the beer to a whole nother level.
Those grapes really just kind of whop you right
They
in the
pop.
face.
That's
That
the
is
first
incredible. Let's break it down. First thing about this beer is it's a collab with Graft. Graft Cider is out of New York. How did a cidery and a brewery end up collaborating together?
So, Graft Cider is by far probably my favorite cider producer. They constantly just push the boundaries for what sour could be, and in my opinion, once you've had a Graft Cider, it's kind of hard to go back to those really traditional dry ciders. They're constantly putting in wild yeast strains, or I believe they're doing mixed ferm stuff.
Yeah.
They're doing stuff with cider that people are doing with beer.
Typically, most of the ciders that I've had from them have been on the tartar side. I don't want to stick my foot in my mouth and say that that's all they do, but really, really good cider. Really good guys. Like I said, it's typically, once you've had one, it's hard to go back to that traditional, just dry style of cider.
We did another collab with them called Shared Universe, was it?
It was so,
and that was more of a beer than a cider. This is more of like a fruit juice based type thing.
So they do. They have a it's not a sub brand. It's called Shared Universe, but that's their collab series.
Gotcha.
So the actual beer was called Monkey Business. Monkey Business was coconut, it's like French vanilla, banana, and it was a cider. So very dessert-like, sweet. I guess called a pastry cider.
So when you guys go into recipe creations with the cidery, who is putting the recipes together? Are you bouncing ideas off of each other? Does it happen kind of organically?
I mean, yeah, more organically. You just kind of start chatting and see what they like, see what we like, and then eventually an idea is thrown out to where you're like, hey, yeah, that's a great idea. I think in the terms of the Monkey Business one, as we all know, Jake likes his desserts, and I think he kind of pushed the coconut and the very sweet coconut cream, banana cream idea. And then with this mixed ferm beer here, it's just it's traditional to use some of these wine characteristics in these sour beers and blueberries, and I think it's something that they were interested in, we were interested in, and
I think Gose was just right off the cuff. We were like, we want to do Gose because we said we had never done a mixed fermentation Gose, and we knew this yeast strain would be perfect for it, and this beer would be perfect for it.
And before this, the last Gose that we did was Spelt Salt, and that was 2017.
Yeah,
we had the kettle sour. So
shameless plug this weekend on Friday, Viva Gose style beer comes out.
And that's the last.
We don't do these beers very often, but we do them very well, and they've all been
three
good.
Three Goses in 3 years. And
something like that.
No, we did the one with barreled souls.
That's right. We did salsa Gose.
We did salsa Gose. So we did a Gose, but we put salsa in it. Yeah, and smoked salt.
Awesome.
Nice.
Really good beer. But
all right. Yeah. There's wine grapes in this beer, and they came from Walsh Family Wines. How did the relationship with Walsh Family Wines start up, and what would you guys say about Walsh?
So first off, love them. Great people. Their wines are phenomenal. Their pet nat is to die for. I think that's my favorite to this day. Like my favorite wine out of Virginia. But the first time I met Sarah was she was doing a wine tasting here for Nectar, and loved her, loved all the wine she brought, and then from there, kind of found out that she owns a winery, and just kind of built this relationship up. Jake built even more of a relationship up, and got to a point where it was like, hey, we want to put grapes in a beer. Can you help us out? And they were more than willing to help us out. Not only with the actual grapes, but any advice they gave us. I mean, it was huge help. So,
if you ever get a chance to get back into the Walsh family tasting room once it's open, if you see Sarah or Nate behind the bar there, pick their brain. They are some of the smartest, nicest wine people I've ever met in my entire life. Highly recommend their wines. Yeah. Their grapes really make this beer. Question on the grapes. So with fruit, and you're putting fruit into beers, sometimes there's concern about other yeasts or things being on the skin of the fruit. What form were the grapes in, and how did you guys manage that in this beer?
Nate had already processed these, so pretty much all we did was go there and fill up some kegs with the juice and put them into that beer. And we didn't really do much to it. With a lot of these beers on the mixed ferm side, usually Brett lives on skins of fruits. I'm not sure what he did to process them, so I can't say that there was anything present on those, but a lot of the other fruits we put in, we just throw in pretty much whole, and whatever's on them is on them.
Whatever happens. Yeah,
cool. Like when we did Persica, those were local peaches.
A giant puncheon full of peaches was in Prosecco.
Yeah,
that was cool.
It was from Great Country Farms, so local peaches as well on that one.
All right, we've beat Brett to death. We've talked a lot about Brett. This beer has lactobacillus in it. What does lactobacillus do in a beer, and what kind of flavor characteristics are you trying to get out of a beer using
that? To me, like lacto is more of a sharp sourness. It's pretty singular as far as the note. This lacto, to me, always drives kind of citrus zest or skin,
it's super
like lemon lime to me. And almost every beer we use it in. This beer, it has so much fruit in it, you don't pick up as much of that. But almost every single beer we put this yeast strain in, you get like kind of bright citrus, like fresh zest.
There's kind of a really cool play that's happening with the grapes and the lacto. The lacto wants to give you like this very sharp tartness, but that kind of grape acidity cuts it off and kind of dries it at the end, so you're not like overly sour. And I think that's just fantastic. All right, guys. Anything you guys would like to add about these beers or native culture before we sign off here?
No, I think you pretty well covered it. It's interesting that you picked these three beers because it's three different yeast strains. That's our house Lactobrevis Brett B strain that you'll see in things like Persica, Aronia, Materia. You've got a coolship, which is you'll see in like Cuvée. And the co-pitch version is, you'll see Saving Light. That's a plug for the end of May. We're going to be releasing Saving Light out of Native Culture.
Oh my God, yes. So real quick on Saving Light. Saving Light used to be a clean beer, and now we've switched it up?
Yes. So kind of, sort of. With the current production for Crooked Run, we don't have time to really do a lot of these like Saisons and classic Belgian styles. Which is unfortunate, but it's kind of the nature of the beast. So we kind of came up with this decision to start doing them on the native culture side because, like I said earlier, a lot of these Belgian beers, they weren't made in a super clean production facility like you see today. And if they picked up a twinge of Brett, so be it. You might have a Belgian quad that picked up Brett B and that drives that leather tobacco notes in it. And so that was something that we started becoming okay with. And we put all of our Saisons in a Belgian program over on the native culture side. And Saving Light is the first clean Saison. It was put into barrels. It was barrel fermented with Stone Tower barrels. And it was done very cleanly. We bottle condition it with our standard champagne yeast. And it's drinking really, really
cool.
Good.
Awesome. So, Brad, anything you like to leave everybody with?
I guess to play kind of off the co-pitch, since we just talked about that, beyond just using that yeast in those co-pitch beers, it's something I really hadn't seen a lot of people promote or say that they did a whole lot. These beers that we're letting sit for like a week and then we're throwing a Saccharomyces strain on. All of those beers, I think, have been some of our best beers.
Absolutely.
I really, like, it was an idea. We just kind of said, why are we not doing this? And every one we've done, we've been more than ecstatic about. Yeah. So it's a cool thing. We did a beer with barreled souls. We used their house yeast, which is kind of it's not super low attenuating, but it leaves some sugar for that Brett to chew on in it. It was such a complex, such a good beer at 11-12% sour beer, which is kind of above and beyond for us. That was the highest ABV beer we've done on that side. But just having those different yeast strands, you can do so much with it. It allows our coolship beers to just go, make a left or right turn, whatever we want to do with them. We can kind of adjust on the fly.
Cool. Well, thank you, Brad. Thank you, Mckinnen, guys. Yeah. Cheers to the CRUN Society.
Cheers.
Hope to do more of this stuff in the future. Enjoy your bottles, guys. See you later.